You think Southern cooking was all about fancy plantation dishes and mint juleps? Think again. These rural Southern kitchens served up some of the most ingenious, soul-satisfying, and surprisingly sophisticated meals in American history. Today, we're diving into 25 down-home Southern recipes you never knew were actually the backbone of survival, community, and pure culinary genius below the Mason-Dixon line. 1. Fried chicken. Let's start with the king of Southern cooking. Fried chicken that could make angels weep and sinners repent. Back in the 1800s, fried chicken wasn't Sunday dinner luxury. It was survival technique perfected by necessity. Scottish immigrants brought basic frying methods, but enslaved African cooks transformed tough old roosters into golden perfection using secrets passed down through generations. You'd catch your bird at dawn, soak pieces in buttermilk overnight with precious salt and whatever spices you could afford. Come morning, each piece got dredged in seasoned flour, creating thick, irregular coatings for maximum crunch. Into cast iron skillets filled with lard it went, crackling and spitting over wood fires requiring constant temperature adjustment. The woman who mastered the crispiest, most flavorful chicken held serious social status. Her recipe was guarded family gold. This dish became currency at church socials, funeral gatherings, and community celebrations, proving that true fried chicken was art, not accident. 2. Ham hocks and butter beans. Ham hocks and butter beans, the miracle dish that could stretch one scrap of meat into a feast for 10 hungry souls. During the Great Depression and long before, ham hocks were butcher scraps, mostly bone and gristle that wealthy folks wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. But Southern cooks knew alchemy that turned throwaway cuts into liquid gold. You'd brown that gnarly hock in a heavy pot, letting smoky, salty fat render slow and steady. Then came dried butter beans that had been soaking overnight and gallons of precious water. This wasn't quick cooking. The pot simmered all day while tough collagen melted into silky, rich broth. The meat would eventually fall off bone, shredding into tender strings that flavored every single bean. The result was thick, creamy stew that stuck to your ribs for hours and warmed you from the inside out. One ham hock could feed a family of 10 with nothing but beans, water, thyme, and Southern know-how. 3. Cracklins. Cracklins, the original Southern snack food that could outlast harsh winters without spoiling and satisfied like meat candy. When families slaughtered hogs each fall, absolutely nothing got wasted. Waste meant hunger, come spring. The fatty skin got cut into small squares and thrown into cast iron pots over roaring fires. For hours, you'd stir those pieces as they slowly rendered their fat, shrinking and crisping until they became golden brown nuggets with the crunch of potato chips and the rich, smoky flavor of bacon candy. The leftover rendered fat became precious lard for cooking and food preservation. Cracklins could be stored for months without refrigeration, making them perfect trail food for travelers and field workers who needed portable protein. They'd get tossed into cornbread batter for extra richness, sprinkled over cooked greens for texture, or eaten by the handful when serious hunger struck. This wasn't just food, it was edible preservation technology that kept protein available year-round, representing the Southern philosophy of waste not, want not. 4. Tomato gravy. Tomato gravy, the breakfast sauce that transformed plain biscuits into a hearty feast when meat was scarce and money scarcer. During lean times that came too often, Southern families needed gravy without expensive meat drippings or fancy ingredients. Enter tomato gravy, made from whatever tomatoes you could grow in your patch, can for winter, or buy cheap at market. You'd start with bacon grease or lard in a hot cast iron skillet, whisk in flour to make golden roux, then slowly add canned tomato juice or fresh tomato puree. The crucial trick was getting it thick and smooth without flour lumps, a skill that separated good cooks from legendary ones. Salt, black pepper, maybe a precious pinch of sugar to cut the acid, and you had rich, tangy gravy that transformed plain biscuits into satisfying breakfast that lasted until supper time. This gravy appeared on tables from Appalachian mountain hollers to Mississippi Delta farms, proving that Southern ingenuity could make something magnificent from nothing but pantry basics and pure determination. 5. Salmon patties. Salmon patties, the Depression-era protein miracle that could feed families on loose change and sheer determination. When fresh meat was pure luxury only rich folks could afford, canned salmon became Southern gold that stretched precious dollars. A single can mixed with yellow cornmeal, farm-fresh eggs, and diced onions could create 4 substantial patties that tasted like prosperity on a plate. You'd mash that pink salmon with fork tines, bones, and all. They'd soften during cooking and add much-needed calcium. Mix in yellow cornmeal for binding and satisfying crunch, crack in an egg or two for richness, add chopped onions for sharp bite and texture. Form into palm-sized patties and fry in hot grease until crispy outside, tender and flaky inside. The result was protein-packed patties with golden cornmeal crust and flaky salmon interior that satisfied like expensive restaurant fare. Served with buttered grits and tangy tomato gravy, salmon patties represented Southern resourcefulness at its absolute finest. One humble can could feed a family of 6, proving that exceptional cooking wasn't about expensive ingredients. 6. Liver and onions. Liver and onions, the iron-rich dish that kept Southern families strong and healthy when prime cuts were impossible dreams. Liver was what you bought when you couldn't afford steaks, chops, or roasts, the organ meat that butchers sold cheap. But cooked with proper technique, beef liver became silky, rich meat that packed more nutrition than expensive prime rib. The crucial secret was soaking thin sliced liver in fresh milk for hours, drawing out the metallic taste that made children run screaming from the dinner table. Then you'd dredge it in seasoned flour and fry it quick and hot. Overcooking turned it to inedible shoe leather. Meanwhile, onions got caramelized low and slow until they were jammy, sweet, and golden brown. The liver cooked in mere minutes, developing a crispy, seasoned crust while staying pink and tender inside. Served with those caramelized onions and maybe some rich bacon grease gravy, liver became a meal that satisfied hunger like expensive steak. This was serious nutrition disguised as pure comfort food, packed with iron, protein, and vitamins that kept hard-working families healthy during the toughest times. 7. Macaroni and tomatoes. Macaroni and tomatoes, the simple pasta dish that turned cheap noodles and canned tomatoes into comfort food that satisfied completely. This wasn't fancy Italian pasta. Macaroni and tomatoes was Depression-era dish that stretched ingredients to feed families when money was tight. Elbow macaroni got boiled until tender, then mixed with canned tomatoes that had been heated and seasoned. The key was getting the ratio right, enough tomatoes to coat every piece of pasta, but not so much that it became soup. Some cooks added diced onions for bite, others preferred keeping it simple. Salt, pepper, and maybe a pinch of sugar to balance tomato acidity completed the basic seasoning. The dish could be served immediately while hot and saucy, or baked briefly to develop richer flavors and slightly thicker consistency. More prosperous families might add cheese or meat, but the basic version was satisfying enough on its own. Served with cornbread for sopping up sauce, it created a complete meal that cost pennies per serving. This was immigrant pasta technique adapted to Southern tastes and economic realities, proving that good food transcended cultural boundaries when necessity demanded creativity. Every bite delivered carbohydrates and vegetables in perfect harmony, creating comfort food that filled bellies and pleased palates without breaking family budgets. 8. Okra and Tomato Stew. Okra and Tomato Stew, the summer garden dish that transformed surplus vegetables into soul-warming comfort that satisfied like meat. When July gardens exploded with more okra and tomatoes than any family could eat fresh, Southern cooks created this thick, hearty stew that could feed unexpected crowds for mere pennies. Fresh okra pods got sliced into neat rounds, releasing their natural mucilaginous thickening agents that would create stew consistency. Ripe red tomatoes were peeled, cored, and chopped into irregular chunks that would break down during cooking. Into a heavy pot with rendered bacon fat they went, along with diced onions, chopped bell peppers, and whatever seasonings the family garden provided. The real magic happened during long, slow simmering. Okra's natural thickener turned the mixture creamy, while tomatoes broke down into rich, flavorful sauce. Some creative cooks added fresh corn kernels for sweetness. Others threw in leftover rice or meat scraps for substance. The result was thick, satisfying stew that could stretch magically to feed unexpected visitors. This wasn't just using up garden overflow, it was creating liquid comfort that captured summer sunshine in every spoonful. 9. Sorghum syrup, the amber liquid gold that sweetened Southern life when white sugar was expensive luxury beyond most families' reach. Before refined sugar became cheap and common, Southern families grew tall sorghum cane and processed it into thick, molasses-like syrup that became their primary sweetener for everything from biscuits to tea. Every fall brought community sorghum making, feeding cane stalks through wooden mills powered by patient mules walking endless circles. The extracted juice got boiled in large copper kettles over wood fires, stirred constantly with long paddles as it slowly reduced to thick, amber syrup. This wasn't quick work. It took entire days of careful attention to prevent burning that would ruin the whole batch. The result was complex flavored sweetener with rich hints of molasses, wildflower honey, and deep caramel that made store-bought sugar taste flat by comparison. Sorghum went on hot biscuits, flavored cornbread and cakes, sweetened bitter coffee and tea, and created desserts that rivaled anything made with expensive white sugar. During the Civil War, when sugar was impossible to find, sorghum became precious currency, traded like gold between neighbors. 10. Molasses bread. Molasses bread, the dark, dense loaf that provided lasting sustenance when wheat flour was scarce and cornmeal was king. This wasn't light, fluffy bread that crumbled at the first touch. Molasses bread was substantial, chewy, and packed with deep flavor that could satisfy serious hunger for hours without complaint. Made primarily with yellow cornmeal, a little precious white flour when the family could afford it, thick blackstrap molasses for sweetness and binding, plus tangy buttermilk and baking soda for modest lift. The molasses gave it deep, rich flavor and dark brown color that looked almost like chocolate cake, but tasted infinitely more complex. Mixed thick as mud and baked in well-seasoned cast iron pans over glowing coals or in wood-fired ovens, it emerged dense, moist, and aromatic. This hearty bread could last for days without spoiling, making it perfect food for field workers and long-distance travelers. Sliced thick and spread with churned butter, it became dessert worthy of Sunday dinner. Dunked in fresh milk or strong coffee, it was satisfying breakfast. Crumbled into vegetable soups or meat stews, it added substance and subtle sweetness that enhanced every meal. 11. Black-eyed peas. Black-eyed peas, the New Year's luck that came with built-in nutrition and time-tested survival wisdom from generations past. These weren't just ordinary beans. Black-eyed peas were Southern insurance against both hunger and malnutrition that could strike without warning. Easy to grow in hot, dry conditions where other crops withered and failed, they actually fixed nitrogen in depleted soil while providing protein-rich harvest that sustained families. Dried peas could be stored for years in sealed containers, making them perfect emergency food that never spoiled. Cooked low and slow with ham hock, fatback, or bacon scraps, they became creamy, flavorful dish that satisfied like meat and potatoes. The cooking liquid, called pot liquor, was liquid nutrition that got sopped up with cornbread. Wasting it was considered sinful. Eating black-eyed peas on New Year's Day supposedly brought good luck and prosperity, but smart families ate them year-round for the guaranteed nutrition they provided. Served with cornbread, pickled onions, and hot pepper sauce, they created complete protein that kept hard-working families strong. This was peasant food that happened to be nutritionally perfect, proving that traditional foodways often contained wisdom that modern science would later confirm and celebrate. 12. Boiled peanuts. Boiled peanuts, the salty, addictive snack that turned raw goobers into southern caviar worthy of any occasion. Fresh green peanuts, still soft in their shells, got dumped into large pots of heavily salted water and boiled for hours until they reached perfect tenderness. This wasn't quick cooking. Proper boiled peanuts required patience as the salt slowly penetrated shells and nuts, creating briny, addictive flavor that made you reach for handful after handful. The cooking process transformed raw peanuts into something completely different, soft, salty, almost bean-like texture that bore little resemblance to roasted peanuts. Street vendors sold them hot from steaming pots, serving them in paper cones or small bags. Gas stations kept them warming in slow cookers, filling the air with their distinctive aroma. You'd crack open the soft shells with your teeth, suck out the salty juice, then eat the tender nuts inside. This was finger food that required no utensils, perfect for baseball games, fishing trips, and front porch socializing. Boiled peanuts created community. Everyone shared the mess, the salt, and the irresistible urge to eat just one more handful, despite being completely full. 13. Buttered rutabagas. Buttered rutabagas, the humble root vegetable that became comfort food when prepared with southern love and plenty of butter. Rutabagas were poor folks' turnips, cheaper, harder, and less respected, but infinitely more nutritious and satisfying when cooked properly. These yellow-fleshed root vegetables could survive harsh winters in root cellars, providing essential vitamins when fresh produce was impossible to find. Peeled and cubed, they went into pots of salted water and boiled until fork tender, which took considerably longer than regular turnips. The magic happened after draining, mashing them with generous amounts of fresh butter, salt, pepper, and maybe a splash of milk or cream created silky golden puree that tasted like sophisticated restaurant fare. Some cooks added a pinch of sugar to enhance their natural sweetness. Others preferred savory seasonings like garlic or herbs. The result was comfort food that satisfied like mashed potatoes, but provided more nutrition and complex flavor. Served alongside fried chicken, country ham, or beef roast, buttered rutabagas proved that humble vegetables could steal the show when treated with respect and proper technique. This was farmhouse cooking that turned necessity into luxury through simple preparation and generous seasoning. 14. Brunswick Stew. Brunswick Stew, the community pot that could feed half the county with whatever meat and vegetables were available. This wasn't individual cooking. Brunswick Stew was a community event that brought neighbors together around massive iron kettles to create thick, hearty stew from whatever everyone contributed. The base always included chicken, often supplemented with rabbit, squirrel, or whatever game hunters brought. Vegetables varied by season and availability. Corn kernels, lima beans, tomatoes, onions, potatoes, and okra when gardens were producing. Everything got simmered together for hours, stirring with long wooden paddles as ingredients broke down into thick, rich stew that stuck to your spoon. The key was cooking it long enough for flavors to meld completely and consistency to thicken naturally. Each family claimed their version was authentic, but truth was that Brunswick stew changed with every cook and every season. Some added hot peppers for heat, others preferred it mild enough for children. Barbecue restaurants served it as a side dish, but originally it was 15. Chocolate biscuit pudding. Chocolate biscuit pudding, the dessert that transformed leftover biscuits into decadent bread pudding worthy of special occasions. When biscuits went stale, throwing them away was wasteful sin that no proper Southern cook would commit. Instead, they became the foundation for rich, chocolatey bread pudding that rivaled any fancy restaurant dessert. Stale biscuits got torn into irregular pieces and layered in buttered baking dishes. A custard mixture of milk, eggs, sugar, and precious cocoa powder got poured over the biscuit pieces, soaking them completely. Some cooks added vanilla extract when they had it, others relied on cocoa's rich flavor alone. The pudding baked slowly until custard set and top developed golden brown crust that contrasted beautifully with creamy interior. Served warm with fresh cream or a dollop of whipped cream, it was dessert that made you forget it started with leftover bread. This was thrift disguised as luxury, taking ingredients that might have been wasted and transforming them into something that guests would request the recipe for. Every bite proved that Southern cooking was about imagination and technique, not expensive ingredients. Chocolate biscuit pudding turned economy into indulgence through the simple alchemy of eggs, milk, and thyme. 16. Tumble cabbage. Tumble cabbage, the simple fried cabbage dish that could stretch a single head into a satisfying meal for the whole family. This wasn't fancy coleslaw or stuffed cabbage. Tumble cabbage was straightforward fried cabbage that became comfort food through proper technique and generous seasoning. A whole head of cabbage got chopped into irregular pieces, creating mixture of thin shreds and chunky pieces that would cook at different rates for varied texture. Into a large skillet with bacon grease or fatback it went, along with diced onions for sweetness and bite. The key was cooking it just long enough to wilt and soften without turning it to mush. Cabbage should retain some crunch and bright color. Salt, pepper, and maybe a splash of vinegar for tang completed the simple seasoning that let cabbage's natural sweetness shine through. Some families preferred it barely wilted and still bright green. Others cooked it longer until edges caramelized and turned golden brown. Served alongside cornbread and beans, tumble cabbage provided essential vitamins and satisfying bulk that turned simple meals into complete comfort food. This was vegetable cookery at its most basic and most satisfying, proof that the simplest preparations often produce the most memorable flavors. 17. Buttermilk pie. Buttermilk pie, the tangy custard-like dessert that turned surplus buttermilk into sophisticated pie worthy of church socials. When churning butter left you with excess buttermilk, throwing it away was unthinkable waste that violated every principle of thrifty cooking. Instead, that tangy liquid became the star of this simple but elegant pie that impressed everyone who tasted it. Fresh buttermilk mixed with eggs, sugar, a little flour for thickening, and vanilla if you had it created smooth, pourable custard filling. Some cooks added lemon juice for extra tang, others preferred buttermilk's natural sourness. The mixture went into unbaked pie crust and baked slowly until custard set and top developed pale golden color. The result was pie with clean, tangy flavor that wasn't too sweet. Sophisticated dessert that cleansed the palate after heavy meals. Texture was smooth and creamy like chess pie, but buttermilk's acidity gave it brightness that prevented cloying sweetness. This was dessert that showcased the cook's skill with simple ingredients, no fancy fruits or expensive nuts required. Buttermilk pie proved that Southern baking was about technique and balance, creating memorable desserts from whatever the farm provided. Every slice was testament to the ingenuity that turned byproducts into beloved traditions. 18. Canned mackerel loaf. Canned mackerel loaf, the protein-packed main dish that stretched canned fish into satisfying meal when fresh meat was luxury. During rationing periods and lean times, canned mackerel offered affordable protein that could be transformed into impressive main course with proper handling. Several cans of mackerel got drained and flaked carefully, removing any stray bones or skin pieces. Mixed with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers, beaten eggs for binding, diced onions for flavor, and seasonings like salt, pepper, and maybe some herbs, it became mixture that held together beautifully. Formed into loaf shape in greased pan, it baked until golden brown outside while staying moist and flaky inside. Some cooks glazed the top with tomato sauce or butter for extra richness and color. The result was satisfying main dish that sliced cleanly and had complex fish flavor without any fishy aftertaste. Served with mashed potatoes and vegetables, mackerel loaf created complete meal that satisfied like expensive roast beef. This was Depression-era ingenuity that turned shelf-stable canned fish into dinner centerpiece that guests would never guess came from tin cans. Every slice proved that skilled cooking could elevate humble ingredients into memorable meals that filled bellies and pleased palates. 19. Meat pie. Meat pie, the handheld meal that packed protein and vegetables into portable pastry, perfect for working folks' dinners. These weren't delicate tea pastries. Southern meat pies were substantial handheld meals wrapped in sturdy pastry that could survive a day in lunch pails without falling apart. The filling started with whatever meat you had, leftover roast beef, pork, chicken, or even wild game, diced small and mixed with potatoes, onions, and carrots. Seasoned with salt, pepper, and herbs, then bound with gravy or broth, it became thick filling that wouldn't leak through pastry. The pastry itself was made with lard for tenderness and durability, rolled thin but strong enough to hold generous filling. Filled, folded, and crimped tight, the pies baked until golden brown and crispy. The result was complete meal in your hand, protein, vegetables, and starch, all wrapped in edible package. Coal miners, field workers, and traveling salesmen could eat them without plates or utensils, making them perfect portable food. Some families made dozens at once, freezing them for quick meals throughout the week. These were practical food that happened to taste incredible, proving that convenience and flavor weren't mutually exclusive when proper techniques guided the process. Chicken and slippery dumplings. First up, the ultimate comfort food that could make one scraggly chicken feed a hungry family of 10. Back in rural America, from the 1800s through the Great Depression, every farm family knew the magic of slippery dumplings. When times got tough and the chicken coop was running low, this dish was pure survival genius. The slippery came from rolled-out dough that was deliberately made thin and slick with flour. Here's the magic. Simmer that precious chicken until meat fell off the bones. Remove chicken, shred every bit, then roll egg noodle dough paper thin. Cut into wide strips and drop directly into bubbling broth. The flour coating made them slick as silk. These dumplings soaked up golden broth while expanding to 3 times their size. This represented ultimate rural values. Nothing wasted, everyone fed. Today's chicken and dumplings pale compared to these stick-to-your-ribs slippery beauties. Corn chowder. Before New England claimed chowder, rural America was ladling up thick, golden corn chowder that could warm you to your bones. From the colonial period through the 1940s, farm families knew corn chowder as the perfect way to use field corn before it got too tough. This wasn't the sweet corn we know today. This was dense, starchy field corn that required real cooking skill to make palatable. The process was labor-intensive love. Cut fresh kernels from cobs, scraping every bit of milk from the kernels with a knife back. Fry salt pork until crispy, then sauté onions in the rendered fat. Add diced potatoes, the corn, and its milk. Then slowly pour in real cream or rich milk. Season with thyme, salt, and white pepper. Simmer until potatoes broke down slightly, thickening the base naturally. This chowder was harvest celebration food, thick enough to stand a spoon in, rich enough to satisfy the hardest working farmhands. Each bowl contained the essence of American agricultural abundance. Modern corn chowder can't match this full-bodied harvest gold original that sustained entire farming communities. Wacky cake, depression cake. This miraculous cake proved you could bake without eggs, butter, or milk, and it actually tasted better than the real thing. Born during the Great Depression, when basic baking ingredients were luxuries, this cake was called Wacky because the recipe seemed impossible. No eggs, no butter, no milk, yet somehow it produced a moist, tender chocolate cake that put expensive cakes to shame. The magic was in the chemistry. Mix flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, and salt directly in the baking pan. Create 3 wells in the dry ingredients. Pour vegetable oil in one well, white vinegar in another, vanilla extract in the third. Pour hot water over everything and stir until smooth. The vinegar reacted with baking soda, creating lift and tenderness. This wasn't just dessert, it was hope in cake form. During America's darkest economic times, families could still celebrate birthdays, holidays, and small victories with this rich, chocolatey treat. Children never knew they were eating poverty cake. Modern box mixes can't match the pure satisfaction of this Depression-era marvel that proved American ingenuity could sweeten even the bitterest times. Boiled dinner, New England style. This one-pot wonder turned tough cuts of meat into tender, flavorful meals that could feed a crowd. From colonial times through the early 1900s, New England families relied on boiled dinner as their weekly feast. Usually prepared on Sundays, this dish transformed cheap, salty corned beef or salt pork into something special while cooking an entire meal in one pot, saving fuel and labor. The ritual was methodical and satisfying. Start with salt-cured corned beef in a large pot, covering with cold water. Simmer for hours until fork tender. Add firm vegetables in order of cooking time. First turnips and carrots, then potatoes, finally cabbage wedges. The vegetables absorbed the rich, salty broth while the meat grew increasingly tender. This wasn't just cooking, it was community building. The long, slow cooking filled houses with savory aromas that drew neighbors over. Leftovers became red flannel hash the next day, extending the meal's life and value. This one-pot meal represented thrifty New England values. Simple ingredients, no waste, maximum flavor. It's the original meal prep that sustained entire communities through harsh winters. Dandelion greens dinner. Before supermarket salads, rural families knew that the best nutrition grew wild in their own backyards. From early spring through late fall, country families foraged dandelion greens as both medicine and food. These weren't weeds. They were free vegetables packed with vitamins that could prevent scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies common in rural areas with limited access to fresh produce. The preparation required timing and technique. Harvest young dandelion leaves before flowers appeared, when they were tender and less bitter. Blanch quickly in boiling salted water to remove some bitterness. Sauté bacon until crispy, remove, then cook onions in the fat. Add the blanched greens with a splash of vinegar or lemon juice. Top with hard-boiled eggs and crispy bacon pieces. This wasn't just dinner, it was spring medicine. After months of stored foods and preserved meats, dandelion greens provided fresh vitamins and minerals that bodies craved. Families looked forward to dandelion time as much as any holiday. These wild greens contained more nutrition than expensive store-bought vegetables, proving that nature provided everything needed for health and satisfaction. Poor man's feast. Despite its humble name, this dish proved that creativity could turn simple ingredients into something truly special. During the Great Depression, families across rural America developed variations of poor man's feast, combinations of whatever was available that somehow added up to more than the sum of their parts. This wasn't just making do, it was discovering that simple ingredients, properly combined, could create genuine satisfaction. The genius was in the layering. Start with sliced potatoes as the base, layering them in a greased baking dish. Add whatever protein was available, leftover meat, canned fish, even hard-boiled eggs. Layer in vegetables like onions, carrots, or canned tomatoes. Create a simple sauce from milk, flour, and seasonings. Pour over layers and bake until golden and bubbling, creating a casserole that was hearty, flavorful, and filling. This dish represented Depression-era optimism, the belief that American families could create abundance from scarcity. Each family's version was slightly different depending on what was available, making every feast unique and personal. It proved that wealth wasn't measured in expensive ingredients, but in the ability to create satisfaction and joy from whatever was at hand. Creamed corn on toast. Before fancy brunches, this simple dish proved that comfort food didn't need complexity to satisfy completely. During the Great Depression and war years, creamed corn on toast became the answer to "What's for dinner?" when pantries were nearly bare. A can of corn, some milk, flour, and day-old bread transformed into a meal that was surprisingly filling and satisfying, proving that simple ingredients could create real comfort. The preparation was pure comfort food simplicity. Make a basic white sauce by melting butter, whisking in flour, then slowly adding milk until smooth and thickened. Stir in canned or fresh corn kernels, seasoning with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of sugar to enhance the corn's natural sweetness. Serve over thick slices of toasted bread, letting the creamy corn soak into the toast. This wasn't just cheap food, it was comfort that could soothe both body and spirit during difficult times. Children looked forward to creamed corn nights, and adults found genuine satisfaction in this humble combination. The dish represented American resourcefulness, taking basic pantry staples and creating something that felt indulgent and special, proving that luxury was more about preparation than price.